On this episode of On Gravel, we find out about the different ways we can mentor from one to a whole entire county. And we have a great discussion on Hot Tang, Mayo, and Miracle Whip.
I think you nailed it.
I mean, Hot Tang is what's going to draw them in.
Well, I can see my breath. The fall has arrived here in northeastern Montana. It is in the upper 30s. I'm sitting at my kitchen table with my jacket on.
Doesn't that feel good?
Actually, it does, although this is the bench clearing sort of dove evacuation cold front. So I had one really good dove shoot this fall, and I was looking forward to maybe one more, but I think that's not going to happen now.
So by all accounts, I was hearing that North Dakota was full of teal, and I wonder if this cold and wet is going to push them south out of North Dakota. And so, you know, as we approach the duck opener up north, like many years, the teal will probably all be gone. So that you find southern gentlemen can shoot the heck out of them, but us northerners won't get to shoot our brown ducks.
Bronson, you and I have talked about kind of my great goal is to shoot a cinnamon teal someday in the United States, or at least in the northern hemisphere. But my other great goal is to shoot a wood duck in northeast Montana. We brewed up a whole lot of them, but they tend to leave with the early cold fronts too. So we'll see. We've got a little slough on between my place and town, and it's full of wood ducks. They're still here, but I think their days are limited.
So I've mentioned that I hunted California last year. One of the weirdest things about that hunt is that we had an afternoon where we were just covered up in wood ducks, and they were coming in to a flooded cornfield. You know, so being a Minnesota guy, you know, you'd occasionally see them around agriculture, but, you know, wood ducks, they fly at first light, and they come back not long after that, full of acorns here. So it was kind of weird to be sitting in a flooded cornfield like I was in the middle of Kansas, but I was in the middle of California, and we had wood ducks coming in all around us. It was kind of fun.
Do you think they were feeding on rice? What would they fill up on there?
Well, I think they were roosting right inside that flooded corn, and I think they were feeding on the corn. I think that was primarily, you know, we were in rice country, so they probably could fly out. And there were, whatever those oak trees are down there, live oaks maybe in central California, and there are oaks, but it's not like where they depend on oak trees up north. I mean, when you shoot a Minnesota wood duck, its crop is usually full of red oak acorns, and these ducks were full of corn. I mean, when I opened up, because I open up the crops, you know, even if I know what they're eating, and they were all eating corn.
I wonder what they eat here, because we have no acorns. There's no oak trees in this Milk River Valley, but there's Russian olives. I've actually seen them up in Russian olive trees. Wonder if that's what they're eating instead.
I don't know.
I got to kill one to autopsy it.
Well, there you go. So you're not doing it just because it's a life lister for you. Now you're doing it for a biological paper.
I'm very curious.
I have a South Dakota wood duck story for you. My first duck of my life was a wood duck, and it was one of those snowy 6-inch South Dakota days that there's absolutely no reason in the world a wood duck would be around. And my dad saw a flock of geese on a farm pond and sent me out into the field to run up over the edge of the farm pond to try and shoot the geese. And as South Dakotans are wont to do, I don't know, do people elsewhere in the world do that? But that's what we did.
They do it everywhere.
Okay, I thought so, but sometimes I feel like maybe I'm a little weird, and not just because of that. So anyway, the geese get up before I get to the farm pond, naturally, because I'm probably huffing and falling and puffing, and they flew right over my head, probably 35 yards above my head. I shot 3 times, reloaded my gun, shot 3 times, and missed 6 times at my first shot at geese, going right over my head. And depressing, turned around, looked at my dad in the truck who was laughing at me, turned back around to kind of pout, and jammed another shell in my gun. And for some unknown reason, a lone duck followed him out of the little farm pond, and it was a beautiful drake wood duck, and I shot him. I think a single BB hit him. He fell dead in the snow, and that guy, my first ever duck, you would have thought that I was going to take him home and cuddle with him. I mean, I have pictures of me with my face touching the duck's face. I was so excited about it.
Well, there is nothing more beautiful than a drake wood duck. Andrew, what was your first duck? Everybody remembers their first duck, I think.
Mine was a juvenile pintail, and I was so excited about it. I took it to my buddy who is a taxidermist, and I showed him this thing. You know, everybody's got their mind's eye, a beautiful bull sprig pintail with racing stripes. And that this was not that. You could barely make out the head differentiation with a slightly white. It looked like an old cotton sheet. Anyway, I did not mount it, but it was delicious.
Good. My first duck was when I was 9 years old, opening day in Minnesota on Leaf Lakes in Otter Tail County, was a blue-winged teal. And my buddy, John Umland, we were both hunting with our dads. His first duck that day was a green-winged teal, it was odd for us to get green-winged teal that early in the season in that part of the state. But so teal for us. And then my brother, who doesn't hunt very much, killed a widgeon, and we never saw widgeons in our part of the state back then. And so so I not only know my first duck, I know all my hunting buddies' first ducks, I guess. And I'm a duck guy.
It was a gift. Well, we're going to talk about other kinds of gifts today. Today, we're going to devote the show to mentoring. This has been it's been a theme that's caught fire happily among at least a certain number of our peers. The idea that we as hunters need to give back our experience, our time, our attention to people who are just starting out on this journey that has given us a lot of ducks and other things. When we were kind of talking about around the idea for this show, it's pretty interesting. We each have kind of a little different perspective on it and a little different plan for the fall. Bronson, talk to me about mentoring.
So up at our farm in west central Minnesota, we've got a fair number of deer, and over the last couple of years, my brother has moved out to Colorado. He doesn't hunt with us every year, but when he does, it's important. It's our version of Christmas, and we have those traditions. And I had introduced a friend of mine a couple of years ago, and he's part of our camp now. And my brother called up my dad and I this week and said that he has a friend that lives here in Minneapolis that he used to work with, and that the guy he's a shooter but has never hunted and is really kind of a local boar and is really interested in kind of getting in touch with where his food comes from. And he had asked Wade about potentially hunting. And so Wade, my brother, asked if we were willing to let him come into camp, and we said the more the merrier. So we're going to have this urban local boar adult onset hunter that's going to be trying hunting for the first time, and it's kind of fun. It gives me an additional kind of idea for preparation to, I got to prepare one more stand so that we've got enough places for everyone. And it's funny, with this weather change this week, the deer really started to move a lot, and I started seeing a bunch of bucks on my trail cameras. I've got a Bushnell wireless trail camera, and so I get the pictures sent to me down in the cities, and my dad and I share the pictures back and forth with each other. And so we had some pretty decent bucks show up on the cameras, and I shared them with Wade and Chris, this local boar urban hunter that's going to be joining us, and he didn't really care about the antlers. All he wants is venison. So if I can't put him on a doe, I'm going to be pretty disappointed, because I think we can. But then, we're realizing not only do we have to get him on a deer, but we got to teach him how to butcher it and cut it all up and do that whole process. It's kind of exciting. It's different than, being out there with a 12-year-old boy or a girl, like the traditional Minnesota new hunter is. So I'm looking forward to that. And I feel like I'm living up to my pledge to Powderhook. So that's one new hunter that we're bringing into our camp this year, and I think it's just it's a small sacrifice for us. In fact, I think we'll probably have a lot of fun with it, just having a new person to share the experience with. And that's what we're doing, one hunter at a time.
So what's your expectation? Is it that this person will go away and then establish their own traditions, or you will come back as kind of a new camp member from year to year? Or what expectations do you have?
I don't know. So, we've had friends come into camp over the years, and there's a culture within our family. It's a family camp, and my mom used to hunt out there with us, and she's in camp, and so there's a family culture there that a person kind of needs to fit with us. We're pretty open and inviting, but we don't want shirkers. We need people that are going to carry their own weight a little bit too, because we've got habitat work that we have to do. I've got buckthorn that needs to be killed. I've got openings that need to be maintained. So as you start to join our camp, there's an expectation that you're going to help with some of that. And we've had a few folks that we haven't invited back in the past because they just didn't really fit. Most of the people we've brought in, buddies of mine for the most part, have been really great, and they are semi-regulars in our camp. And so I think we go into this with the expectation that he's probably going to need a couple of years to kind of learn the game and figure out if that's what he likes and what he wants. And if there's room for him and he's not wound up about shooting, trophy deer, then we certainly can meet that need. We're in west central Minnesota. We've got a healthy deer population right now. We've got plenty of does, and we can help him fill his freezer. So I think there's a real possibility this might be his only hunting opportunity and experience, and if that's it, that's okay. But hopefully we'll teach him enough skills where, if he wants to go and buy his own hunting land or start hunting public land somewhere in Minnesota or elsewhere, he'll be able to do it. But I think it's one step at a time. We got to evaluate him and see if he fits, but also, hopefully teach him the skills so he can feel independent. I don't ever want anyone to feel like they can only hunt with me. I always want them to be able to feel like, if I'm not there, that they're capable of doing it on their own. I think that's what a mentor owes to a mentee.
I think sometimes we forget to the other side of the equation, and that is, he's going to be evaluating you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that changes your behavior or kind of if you're letting your hair down all the time, or if there's a certain sort of decorum or presence that you maintain because of that. Well,
we're serious in our camp, so we're not up drinking all night.
That's a first for you, isn't it?
No, that's you're creating you're trying to project an image on me that I've only earned partially. So, well, unless we all take out the first night, then what the hell? But so I think there's that. But I also kind of have a tradition, a little bit of hazing the new guy. I guess that's not politically correct anymore. So but I think in my deer camp, I don't have to be totally politically correct. I mean, you're coming in to hunt. I mean, so you're outside of the norm already. I might haze him a little bit. Look, he might think I'm an asshole. I might think he's an asshole. Who knows? We'll find out. He's my brother's friend, so I got, if it doesn't work out, what do I got to lose?
So Dinger's going to talk a little bit about, I hope, there's a new feature in the Powderhook app called Camps. And really they're places where mentors can have, build a relationship with apprentices or mentees, as we're calling them. But what do you call your camp? Or what would you call your camp on Powderhook?
The Bronson camp or the Dinger camp?
Well, the
Bronson family would name their camp the Dinger camp? That's
I'm just clarifying.
He is an asshole.
Well, if I called it the Dinger camp, people would just drive up and down the gravel road on the edge of our property trying to shoot deer. So,
oh, jeez.
That's a South Dakota pheasant hunter's reference. I wasn't trying to call you a road hunter. I don't know. I think I just call it the Bronson.
I get the reference.
We just call it Bronson Camp, I think.
Dinger, what's your mentoring plan?
Well, before I jump into that, I want to make an admission to you guys in some ways. As you were talking about your friend, the locavore, and about kind of why he deer hunts, I was thinking to myself, that's almost exactly why I deer hunt. I'm an uplander first. I love to bird hunt. And I do that because I'm passionate about it. What?
Zinger, are you Bronson's brother's friend? Has this come full circle?
Woo! See that? I just weaseled my way into Bronson camp. No, but your friend that is coming up just to shoot a doe and fill the freezer, I've never thought of it this way before, but when I deer hunt, my wife always shoots first. And for probably 10 years, I was on this mission where I wasn't going to shoot a deer unless it was bigger than the biggest deer I'd ever shot. And everything about that changed the year my wife shot her first deer, which was literally the smallest buck ever shot in America. It was, I think it still had milk on its lips, but it was the last day of the season. She had an any sex tag. And so she shot this deer, and it was a button buck, but like just barely a button buck. And we, proudly celebrated her first deer, took it home and ate it. And it was like so much better than every deer I'd ever killed. Like it was so delicious. Like the backstraps on that deer were as good as any steak I've ever had. Like just a fantastic cut of meat for any, whether wild game or not. And as you were talking, Bronson, I'm like, I think I'm like a convert. I think I might be a meat hunter when it comes to deer much more than I am a trophy hunter. And I don't know if that's because I don't have a property to manage or if I just really enjoy deer meat. I'm probably pretty weird compared to most people in the outdoor industry, but
No, I don't think so. I think meat hunting is by and away the biggest priority. Most people aren't all that wound up about antlers. Obviously, I think people are going to shoot the bigger buck if there's two of them standing out in the field, given the choice. But I don't think that makes you weird at all. I consider myself still a meat hunter. The thing is, on our place, we've got a bunch of neighbors that are all practicing quality deer management, and so we know that it's possible that we can grow some bigger than average deer around us, and if we know we can fill the freezer with does and fawns, and I love back in the days when we could shoot 5 antlerless deer each in Minnesota. I can't eat 5 full-grown does, but I can sure eat 5 fawns in a year. So I used to fill my freezer with a lot of fawns. We don't quite have the same robust deer population today so I'm not shooting all fawns, but it's veal. It's venison veal. Why wouldn't you take that?
Mm-hmm.
They're delicious.
Mm-hmm. All right, I didn't mean to hijack this conversation, but so mentoring. My work this fall, I've been inviting people that I've never invited before. It hasn't worked out just yet. I would say in my life, there are probably 10 or 12 people that today consider themselves hunters that I brought for the first time and I showed. But this year we're trying to do it a little bit differently. So my wife is one of those people. And an example of what we're doing for the purpose of bringing new people outdoors, mentoring you could call it, is my wife has invited her friends to join us on a pheasant hunt. The first time we've ever really tried to do this in this way. And she runs around with a pretty good group of gals from Lincoln. And so we put together what we're calling the Powderhook Women's Hunt. And I think she's got 15 or so women signed up that will pheasant hunt with us for the first time they've ever hunted anything, period. And what's interesting about that is a couple of things. Number one, that we focused on women, and because it was only women, it filled pretty quickly. Almost everybody she asked said yes. But number two, something happened that, and I mentioned this to the two of you guys last night. I think there's something to be learned from this slight anecdote. One of my hunting buddies, my wife asked his wife if she wanted a pheasant hunt. And my hunting buddy texted me last night and said, hey, your wife asked Ange to go pheasant hunting. She had honestly never considered it, and now she's so extremely excited. And, oh, by the way, I'm taking her shopping tomorrow. And what clicked with me was like, so much of our energy as sportsmen has gone to introducing youth and to when we thought new people over the last several generations, we were constantly thinking about how do we get kids out with Green Wings and youth to the Pheasants Forever youth hunt and mentees into the Pass It On Outdoor Mentors program. And I still think that's extremely important, but this was really eye-opening for me that, like, if you invite adults, they haven't even been yet, and they're out gear shopping, they're doing things that kids can't do. And they're all going to drive themselves out to this hunt, and almost statistically speaking, they're just way more capable of going again if they enjoy it. And so that's one thing that Steph and I are working on the personal side this fall. We've got a couple neighbors that have never been that we're going to get out. And I've got a hunt to South Dakota. I take a bunch of newbies every year. A bunch of people that were once newbies, but several of them only hunt during that trip each year. So, but outside of that, I should probably tell you about what we're doing on Powder Hook real quick. So we've kind of hitched our wagon to this mentoring concept at Powder Hook. And, one of the things that I've noticed since joining the industry is these concepts kind of come and go. So when I first joined the industry, Andrew was writing for Open Country, and so much of the talk was about access. Access here, need access. Access is the problem. Access is the choke point. And prior to that, it was probably, deer management or letting your deer get older, or I don't know, you guys have been in the industry a lot longer than I have, but it seems like there's the habitat was a huge one when I was a kid. Everything was about habitat. All you ever heard anybody talk about was more habitat, more habitat, more habitat. Well, now it seems like mentoring is the vogue thing, and I guess there's a reason for that. It's probably because each of us had a mentor, and the way that we became hunters is logically the way we should make the next one. Most of us had a mentor. So Powder Hook has built these mentoring tools into our app, and the way I think about it is actually not just about, quote unquote mentoring. I think that mentoring is the answer to all of those other trends. And so I think it's really smart that our industry has begun to focus on the concept of mentoring, because in my life, it was my mentor who found me access. It was my mentor who overcame my gear challenges. It was my mentor who drove me to the place that we hunted. It was my mentor who taught me to care about habitat. It was my mentor who, introduced me to how to clean something after I was successful in harvesting something. And so I think it's smart to focus on mentoring. The hard part of that is, for our industry, we've had mentoring programs for far longer than I've been a part of it, and probably far longer than I've been alive. The challenge is those don't grow. They can't scale, because to be a traditional mentor takes a lot of time over a longitudinal period. The downside of that for the mentor is, then when do I get to hunt? As a hunter myself, I think of longitudinal mentoring as really stressful right now, because I'm down to probably 15 or 20 days a year total where I'll hunt at all. Down from, pre-kids and pre-tech startup of probably 40 or 50 days a year. And that's just the reality. So the thought of being a longitudinal mentor for somebody just scares me, because I know I'm going to let them down. So what Powder Hook has created is this digital concept where I can mentor lots of people simply with what I know. I can invite them to the things I know I'm going to, like, October 4th Ducks Unlimited banquet and the women's hunt that we're putting together in October. I can invite my mentees to that and use those things I'm already going to as a chance to mentor lots more people. Sure, it's not the same thing as my dad teaching me to hunt, but we need badly in this industry to scale the concept of what it means to be a mentor. And that's what Powder Hook works on every day. And today, if you download the Powder Hook app and check it out, become a mentor, you'll see that in a matter of a few days, you may have a couple, 2, 3, the app's 2 weeks old. I have 10 mentees. That's kind of cool.
Well, and Dinger, I think you've kind of led me along on this too. When Eric told me that he had 10 digital apprentices or mentees, my initial reaction was kind of what he just talked about, and that is, how in the world can you ever adequately deliver wisdom and guidance to that many people? But I'm excited about the Powderhook toolbox because I think you're exactly right. It doesn't have to be an all-in intensive experience with each one of those. It's really just being there to answer questions as they come up. And that's a good gift. It's a great gift. I think.
What about you, Andrew? What are you doing this fall?
Well, we've got some interesting kind of macro, kind of ambitious plans throughout my whole county, but I'm going to cast back just a little bit to the R3 symposium that actually we held in Lincoln. That's where we announced I was going to join Powderhook, and it was kind of a big kind of inflection moment for me personally. But the number of people who were at that and variety of people were really interesting, including this one kid from California. His name's Nick Fasciano, and Nick, if you're listening, props to you. But he wasn't really affiliated with anybody else, an agency or an organization. He just was there by himself, and we got talking one night, and he basically said he was here because he wanted to learn how to hunt and had heard about this, and that's what drew him to the R3, which is kind of the recruitment, reactivation, and retention symposium. So being who I am, I guess, I said, well, you're welcome to come hunt with me if you want. But it was actually too late at that point for a non-resident to apply for a general hunting license in Montana. But we do have antlerless tags. The quotas come out later, and you can kind of get an after the deadline application in. So I said, if you're serious about it, I encourage you to apply for one. He did. He drew it, and he's coming out here this fall. So he's going to stay with us, and I think he's going to use my guns, and he's going to hunt on our place and stay with us. So it's a little bit like Bronson's Deer Camp. We have somebody who's just immersed in kind of our hunting family for, I guess, as long as it takes. So that's the microscopic. On the macroscopic scale, I've mentioned a couple of times that a couple of years ago we started a local sportsman's club here in Glasgow, or Glasgow, as some people say, that is kind of similar to the old rod and gun clubs that sprung out across the country after World War II, which is not associated with a particular species like a duck or a pheasant or an elk, but it's a conservation group that's really devoted to just solving local issues. And ours is called Highline Sportsman, and we've done a bunch of really cool things. We've got a mini grant program where we give up to $1,000 for conservation projects, and we try to donate sweat equity to Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service programs and projects where we can. But we all got together a couple months ago and decided that we wanted to make mentoring a big part of what we do. So we've put out a call that any beginning hunter in the county, regardless of age, is encouraged to contact members of the Highline Sportsman to basically develop that mentoring relationship one-on-one. The Highline Sportsman member is committed to taking them out. If the beginning hunter has a tag, that's great, and we'll help them fill their own tag, and we'll help them butcher or field dress and butcher. If the beginning hunter doesn't have a tag but is just interested in coming along, then we will hunt and we'll take them along with us. We will hopefully get an animal, we'll field dress it, but then the gift is all of the meat from our animal we want to present to the beginning hunter. Obviously, if it's their animal, we want to help them care for it and take it home with them. So I'm pretty excited to see how it goes. It's going to be sort of one-on-one, but I think the cumulative effect of it could be that scaling ability that Dinger talked about. My great hope is that we get just a whole variety of these beginning hunters and a whole variety of mentors. I'm hopeful my own kids will step forward as mentors and maybe take some of their high school friends who've never hunted before too. So that's my other great hope, is each generation is going to kind of have some cross-pollination throughout this whole experience.
So Andrew, what county is Glasgow in?
Glajiga is in Valley County, Montana.
So how big is, any idea how many people live in Valley County, Montana?
Well, Glasgow is about 3,500 souls, and it's probably about twice that number for the whole county.
Okay.
We've got in some of our early organizational meetings talking about this idea. We probably have 8 to 10 Highline Sportsmen members who have held up their hand and said they would be willing to take new people. So that seems about right. If 10 of us take 10 people, and maybe like a few of us are committed to doing it a couple of times this season, I think that's a really good start. And I expect we're going to get some beginning hunters who have just come through the hunter safety program, hunter education program. But I think we're also going to get some beginning hunters who are older, who have maybe had a hunting license in the past, but didn't really have anybody take them, so they've lapsed. And then I think we'll have some absolutely brand new, freshly minted people who will go and buy a hunting license on the basis of this opportunity. We've got a couple other cool things. We've got a gear checkout program, so we're going to basically have any gear that somebody needs, us members will have it available for on a loaner basis. We're going to have a sight-in day where all of the participants of this will come and sight in their guns together, and we'll have a big barbecue and picnic as a result of that. And then at the end of the whole thing, we're going to try to have a wild game dinner or a feast with all the participants. We hope, people can come and bring a dish with their own game meat, and then we'll have a big slideshow and hopefully kind of a lot of fellowship around just sharing kind of the imagery from the experience.
So I got to tell you, when I was working for Minnesota DNR a long time ago, and I hate dating myself, but so I started a hunter recruitment program for Minnesota DNR in 2003. And one of the first things that I did is I started these youth hunt programs. And the reason that was because that's what I could gain political support to do. We recognized that was always going to have limited success down the road. But back at the time, getting funding from the legislature and from the agency to fund an adult education program just wasn't going to happen, because people didn't get the warm fuzzies from taking their neighbor or some college graduate out in the field the same way that they did introducing a 12-year-old boy or a 12-year-old girl to shooting for the first time. But I've always looked at this that as a hunting community, my expectation is that every hunter today should feel it's their responsibility to introduce their own children to the sport, whether they continue to do it or not, and we want to offer them tools to help do it. But the organized outside programs are probably better focused on the people that fell through the cracks the first time through as potential youth hunters, to help get the adults, to help get the lapsed hunters. And what sounds really cool about what you're doing in Montana there is you're creating, hopefully, a local culture where people are just going to start introducing people to the sport and break down some of those barriers that, you're not in my family, so I'm not going to take you hunting. Doing some of those more informal things. So what I found when I was working on policy things at the agency is trying to change regulations that made it easier to help people get in the sport. So when we started in Minnesota, at the time when we started these youth turkey hunts, in order to take another person out hunting, to call for them, to do the things that a guide would do in the state of Minnesota, you had to have a license that was valid for that season. So right there, it limited my ability to help recruit mentors because the law prevented it. And so those were some of the regulatory things that we changed. So I'm wondering if you're running into any sort of regulatory barriers, or if since you're doing kind of informally, is it just kind of working, where the whole community culture is just getting things done?
Well, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. We do have an apprentice license here. It's about 4 years old. In fact, my daughter was the first year. Her age group was the first year to be able to take advantage of that. So it allows a prospective hunter to be able to buy a hunting license. It's kind of a provisional hunting license without having gone through hunter education. So I think that allowance is going to allow us to really reach out to people who haven't gone through the whole formal hunter education program. And at this point of the season, it's really too late. We've got one more class here before the season starts. But if you miss that, that's kind of a barrier as well. there's a provision in Montana that if you were born prior to 1985, basically you're grandfathered in and you don't have to take hunter education in order to buy a license. And so my hope is that some of the people who have not bought a hunting license in the past but have an interest in it, who are adults now and qualify for that grandfather clause, will be able to just go out and buy a hunting license. And, I hope they find that's an easy process to go through and continue to do it year after year.
That's pretty cool.
Ryan, you said something, you've said twice during this podcast, the word culture. And I think that's the right question. Not that you would have asked it if it was the wrong question, but my wife and her youth and her women's hunt is something I want to bring up, because my wife is a cool person, and because hunting is different for a middle-aged woman to do in Lincoln, and because she's got great pictures of her having fun hunting, when she sends her pictures to her friends asking them if they want to go, she's made it look really cool and really fun. And so in some ways, and I guess I'm just offering this as a general point of view, but in some ways, doing it a little bit differently than the grip and grin and then what you see online, and doing it in a way that makes it look fun for your peer group, seems to me to be the thing that she was able to do to recruit these people. And so if that is a difference in culture, I don't know, but it's certainly a difference in the way that she talks about it differently and she presents it much differently than I do. And I don't honestly know that in the amount of time it's taken her, I don't think I could have recruited 15 people to go hunting with me that were already hunters, much less not hunters. So that's something to think about for you two and for our listeners, is how do we put forward from Highline Sportsman? How does the Bronson family show hunting in a way that is cool and fun and something that they're lucky to be a part of or lucky to have the chance to do? Because I think that's how we all feel about it. But sometimes we lose that when it gets to sort of the rote level and to the, of course I'm a hunter, I've always been a hunter level.
Yeah. I was kind of kidding before when I've talked about, when Chris comes into our hunting camp, I'm going to haze him. I'm not. I mean, for me, I think I'm going to probably be asking him a lot. Well, I'm going to treat him like a normal hunter. I'm not going to try to make him cry or anything. I'm not going to make him eat the liver raw or anything like that. But I'm going to ask him. I want to ask him questions about perceptions and things. And one of the things that I've decided that this year I'm not going to take hero shots, or if I take hero shots, I'm not going to put them on social media. I might text them to my buddies, but I'm probably not going to put them on social media. I'm going to try to focus a little bit more on the experiential parts, the things that are fun. And that's always been hard for me to take those photos, to capture those magic moments before the shooting starts in the duck boat and things like that. One, it's too dark to take photos, and you can't use flash in the duck blind. But capturing some of those moments, I'm going to try to do it. And I've done it over the last couple of years with my son, where I've kind of documented some of the funny things. And I recently shared a video that I took a couple of years ago when I had. He was on his first deer hunt out in the woods, sitting in the sand with me, and we got a deer right away at first light. And then I waited half an hour before we went and blood trailed it. And so I have this whole video of him blood trailing the deer. It's funny because you can see the deer. It's about 30 yards away from us when we start, and you can actually see it, and the blood trail goes right up to him. But a 4-year-old boy trying to follow a blood trail through the woods is kind of funny, and he veers off a couple times, and then he comes back, and then the line that he gives me right after he finds the deer is he tells me that he thought the deer was a dolphin, and it's just hilarious. But it was that's kind of opened my eyes to remembering that other people see the hunting woods and the hunting experience differently based on where they're at in their development and everything else. And so that was cool. So I'm hoping that I'll have the opportunities to kind of ask those questions and try to change how I project hunting to non-hunters that might be my Facebook friends or might follow me on Instagram, at Bronson Ryan, by the way, if you would need to follow me on Instagram. but I'm going to try to get away from the hero shots because I think that I've heard enough feedback from people that they think it projects the wrong thing, that it projects our dominance over the wildlife instead of really capturing the experience of hunting. And the whole reason we all do it is because we're so enmeshed in the hunt, and really the first time you get a chance to stop and think and worry about taking pictures, for most of us that aren't outdoor media, that are trained or are getting paid to document the experience, is that at the end of the hunt, when everything's done, you take the hero shot, and it's look, sitting behind an animal and grinning I have no problem with that. I think that's an important thing. I want people to understand everything that led to that. Now, I think standing behind the animal and grimacing at the camera like you're angry, that's a worse image to project. But that's probably a whole different topic. But that's part of what I'm hoping, is that every time I bring a new person into our camp, is that I can hopefully learn a little bit about their motivations and how they see the world, and maybe I can do a better job of projecting a better image for hunting for everybody.
Well, you're onto something. I think this is a topic of a whole other podcast, but we've been talking a little bit this summer about kind of the reflexive defense that we all go on when we try to explain why we hunt. And
yeah,
a lot of the times it does sound defensive, but it gets into the abstract right away of like, well, I hunt because conservation is important, or I hunt because the North American wildlife management system is dependent on hunters hunting. Well, like, that is just so airy and fluffy. Like, nobody really knows what it means. I love the idea of reducing hunting to its elemental. It's fun, it's healthy, it's exciting, it's challenging. All those verbs and adjectives that are active and that I think get really at the essence of why a lot of us hunt. We just tend to forget about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. It's a whole different topic that we could lead in down a rabbit hole. But this whole notion that everyone's first defense of hunting is that if we didn't, the populations would, become overpopulated. That's not true. Nobody goes out there and squeezes the trigger, with the exception of maybe some people that are hired by the state to do depredation shooting because they're trying to reduce the population. You're doing it for a lot of motivations that are perfectly legitimate. It's just that some folks think that it's hard to explain why it's fun and why that having fun killing an animal how is that legitimate? Heck, Dinger's getting hate mail from England because he's out there, promoting hunting, because people think what he does and what we do is illegitimate. But humans have been doing it forever. It's part of what separated humans from, Homo erectus. So we need to get beyond that. And frankly, when we talk about the biology, there's a lot of species that we hunt, and we're taking the harvestable surplus that is there, and our hunting has absolutely nothing to do with controlling their population. We don't hunt pheasants because pheasants are going to eat themselves out of house and home next year if we don't. We do it because we can, because there's a harvestable surplus. And that's perfectly okay, but a lot of hunters have troubles explaining that. So the whole I think the food issue is central for almost all of us, and I think it's a good place to start.
Well, I think it's also a really good place to stop. So I want to, we've all been way too agreeable with this, and we don't have enough hate mail in our lives. And you mentioned food, so I'm going to ask you the dichotomous question of the day. Miracle Whip or mayonnaise?
Miracle Whip.
What?
I expected nothing less from you.
Miracle Whip.
Frankly, more.
What? I don't even know if they sell mayonnaise in the stores up here in Minnesota. It's only Miracle Whip.
Industrial lubricant in a jar. I'm a mayonnaise man.
Honest to God, I would have bet you all the money in my pocket, which is not that much, that you were going to say mayonnaise. Like, you're such a wholesome, real guy. I want everything real and authentic and legitimate. Like, Miracle Whip is, I'm pretty sure it's leftover embalming fluid with some jelly in it or something. I don't.
It's a
what
polymer
actually
paste. It's a polymer paste.
Like if we inject that in our dead grandparents, or they'll be fine forever. We could do Weekend at Bernie's with them, couldn't we?
If we inject our dead grandparents with Miracle Whip. What the listeners need to know is Dinger right now is just trying to come up with the one-liners that we use as teasers for this podcast, is what he's doing right now.
Oh, yeah, you're inferring we have the editing ability to put some one-liners at the beginning.
Well, between, me and my Miracle Whip lies a gravel road. No. Seriously, I've never read the bottle. Really, what's in Miracle Whip? What do I need to know about Miracle Whip that I didn't know? That's just, when you need something tangy to mix with your tuna to put on toast, it's Miracle Whip. That's what you grab.
I think the miracle part of it is that people are still eating it.
Or alive if they did.
What else are you going to put on your Velveeta sandwich? You put out a piece of Wonder Bread.
The other half of the question was what? Mayonnaise, sir. Mayo. Miracle Whip is basically like saying to America, yeah, I'm not fat enough. I should eat this. This half Vaseline, half processed sugar, 2/3 lubricant thing. I'm going to put this on my toast because it's going to taste good. And then I can get fatter. Yeah. That's exactly how that goes.
Are you holding mayonnaise up as health food?
I mean, relatively, yes.
Okay. What's in mayonnaise? What is it? There's eggs, I think, and what else? What's in mayonnaise?
Egg yolk and oil.
Then where does the sour flavor come from? Which of those is spoiled?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to say that, Miracle Whip is just an empty promise of an artificial tang. And if the tang is the only thing you kind of hang your hat on, it's failed already.
Can I tell you my tang story, since we're talking?
Oh, boy.
Oh, it gets better. As a 10-year-old, my dad would bring me up to Goose Camp, way up in northwestern Minnesota, near the town of Middle River, is this Thief Lake Wildlife Management Area, where was one of the places before giant Canada geese became ubiquitous in the state. It was one of the places you could go and hunt geese because the migrants would come through there and stage on the refuge. Controlled hunting zone. You could only shoot bring 6 shells into the blind, everything. So we would go up there with a group of guys. Everybody. These are the old timers that worked at Federal back in the 70s and 80s. And we would go up there with our F-shot steel because it was the early days of the steel requirement. And every morning we'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go do the early draw to get your blinds. And the only thing we had for breakfast is we would make hot water and dissolve tang in it. So every morning we would have hot tang for breakfast. And it wasn't until, this is pre-pubescent Ryan time, so it never even occurred to me that might sound, I don't know, sexually inappropriate to tell people about how we were always having hot tang, but we did. So it took, for several years, I was having hot tang before I knew it was something to giggle at.
And then that's how nicknames were born.
The hot tang. All right, Mr. McKean, bring us home, will you?
No, somebody else.
Wait. Before we do that, I just Googled it, and according to SteadyStrengths.com, Miracle Whip has been considered healthier version of mayo. So according to SteadyStrengths.com, which I'd never heard of before, I just Googled it. It's healthier.
It sounds like a supplement company itself.
It could be. All right, sorry.
Big Pharma.
All right,
that's a Big Pharma website.
I'll take us out today, but somebody else has got to carry this weight the next time. You've been listening to a lively discussion of mentoring, food choices, and What else did we talk about today?
Glaze goo.
Glaze goo. So until next time, stay on gravel and have a great week.